Hello again, Jared Pitts here, and today I'm going to be reading another Dr. Brewer article. And again, this website was done by Joy Jones, RN. This is a very important website, drbrewerpregnancydiet.com, that kind of gives a nice summary of Dr. Brewer's work. Today I'm going to be looking at the salt article, and again all of these articles are along the side here, and this one right here is called Salt because I think this is one of the most important ones to understand the importance of salt during pregnancy and just in life. A lot of people that I talk with and do coaching with, when I'm trying to help them understand some water retention issues they may be having, a lot of the time I'll send a Dr. Pete article, for example, the water and swelling one, and this one goes along with that nicely. And again, Dr. Brewer and this information here from Joy Jones is a bit more easily accessible for your everyday human, like myself, a little bit more accessible than Dr. Pete's work. It takes quite a bit of background and a lot of reading and research in order to be able to fully understand what Dr. Pete is writing in his articles, whereas a normal person that hasn't done a lot of research and reading can get a basic grasp of the understanding of these basic physiological processes when reading these articles on the Dr. Brewer Pregnancy Diet website. Before I get into this article, just want to remind you, you can support the channel by using my links in the description of all my videos to purchase supplements like aspirin, vitamin D3, K2, vitamin A, methylene blue, etc. And a lot of these things are supplements that Dr. Pete researched and shared with us about. When you use the link, you get a small percentage off, up to 20%, and then I get a small cut, so win-win. You can also book a free consultation with me on MissouriHealthCoach.com or email me directly at MissouriHealthCoach@gmail.com. All right, this is how it goes. Salt is vitally important for a healthy pregnancy. That's the name of the article. And then we have a special health alert, all in red at the top. And here it is. For those of you who live north of the equator and are entering a season of hot and humid weather and increased outdoor activity, please be aware that extra loss of salt through sweat and extra burning of calories can trigger a rising blood pressure and other preeclampsia symptoms. Please see the quote-unquote special needs page, and that's another article here on the site, and the bottom of the weekly record page for ideas on how to compensate for these losses and thus help yourself to prevent preeclampsia and other complications related to low blood volume. Please see the frequently asked questions page for information about why just drinking extra water probably won't be enough to keep your blood volume adequately expanded for an optimally healthy pregnancy. And I said this in the last article, I'll say it again, this is not just for pregnant women. This is also, this is for everyone, okay? And I'm not saying that in a PC way, I'm saying that in the sense that everyone has this system within their body, right? Kidneys and renin and angiotensin, aldosterone, and salt, and how that plays with edema and water retention and water in our cells versus water outside our cells, in our blood and things of this nature. So just because this is called the Dr. Brewer Pregnancy Diet.com, right, website, this is for everyone, and this is very helpful in understanding why it's important to get a healthy amount of salt. Okay, moving on. For those of you who live south of the equator and are entering the cold winter season, please be aware that many homes and work environments are overheated with very dry air and may cause you to lose salt and fluids in the same way as hot weather does. And shoveling snow or working out in a gym burns extra calories. These losses might also lead to a falling blood volume and its accompanying complications, just as the summer heat does. So please be watchful and care for your personally unique needs for salt and fluids, as well as your unique needs for calories and protein. Okay, getting into the main bulk of the article. At the Salt and Pregnancy Forum of May 2006, organized by USALT, Professor Dr. Marcus G. Mohaupt, already underlined that pregnancy is no time to reduce salt intake, and that additional salt may benefit women suffering from preeclampsia. And I'll say this real quick up front because this is, from my experience, the people that are doing the no salt or low sodium diets, outside of just trusting the FDA and all of its recommendations, a lot of people will do these things and they feel a health benefit from them. And so they'll think that they'll decide that this was the reason why it was helping, and thus it'll be true always and in all cases, right? For example, people will say they're going on a no salt diet because they think that's the problem, and by doing that, they cut out all fast food. All of a sudden, they have more energy and they feel healthier and they're losing weight. Maybe they were overweight, right? And so they think, well, salt was the problem. Well, obviously, cutting out fast food and all that polyunsaturated fatty acids and everything else that goes along with that, that's going to be a huge benefit for you, right? But when you go for extended periods of time not eating salt, you're going to have problems. This is a primary electrolyte. This is an extremely important part of your nutrition. So anyway, that's one of the main reasons I've seen that people continue in this no sodium diet. And a lot of people need to reassess that. Why are you healthier on this diet? And why might it cause problems long term? And how could you cut out fast food and still eat salt, right? And also people have this interesting perspective, and Dr. Pete discussed this quite a bit, of doing the things that are the most difficult doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily the right thing, right? And so people will think their body is craving salt, so it must be bad, right? My body's craving sugar, so it must be bad for some reason. I gotta slam the, raw green salads. Well, that is, our bodies were created to know what they need, right? And so this is the age-old stereotype of a pregnant woman wanting the jar of pickles, right? Why is that? Well, it's probably because it's extremely high in salt, and her body's craving that. Or wanting the pint of ice cream, at 10 o'clock, sending her husband out to get it. Why does she want ice cream? Well, without all the gums and fillers, ice cream can be quite a healthy product. Okay, moving on. Recently, Professor Dr. Mohaupt published a case study, and these are all referenced, so here's the second reference, showing that an additional salt intake of 20 grams stopped hypertension during pregnancy. In this case, remember this is a case study, so a singular case. In this case, a 33-year-old woman with normal renin activity was diagnosed with essential arterial hypertension 15 years ago. During the 6-month period before conception, her blood pressure was well controllable by dual antihypertensive treatment. Throughout pregnancy, blood pressure recordings were collected daily, and at 5 weeks of gestation, in her first pregnancy, she stopped all antihypertensive drugs. As a result, the average blood pressure increased, whereas the expected increase in aldosterone synthase activity in pregnancy did not show. Given this hypoaldosteronism, sodium supplementation aiming at 20 grams total sodium chloride intake per day was initiated and pursued throughout pregnancy, and resulted in a decrease of the blood pressure during pregnancy. After delivery, maternal blood pressure rose again. Sodium chloride supplementation, and sodium chloride is just salt, right? Pure white salt. Sodium chloride supplementation was terminated and antihypertensive treatment was reinstalled. The observation that blood pressure was responsive to sodium chloride supplementation is in line with the hypothesis that intravascular volume decrease causes increased blood pressure in pregnancy. The absence of the expected increase in aldosterone synthesis was associated with a mutation of the aldosterone synthase gene, similar to earlier findings in pre-eclamptic women. This persistent hypoaldosteronism, together with earlier findings on sodium chloride supplementation, led the researchers to supplement salt in this woman. This salt supplementation was associated with a reduced blood pressure throughout pregnancy. In addition to this case, Mrs. Sabine Coos, founder of a support group in 1984 for women in acute state and after pregnancy with preeclampsia or HELLP syndrome, and her team have been advising more than 20,000 women during their high-risk pregnancy over the past 22 years. And this is such a funny idea to a lot of people, the idea of supplementing sodium chloride. There's so much misinformation out there about salt. And I think I've told this story before in another article by Dr. Pete on salt. But I have a friend, a Mexican friend, who used to, when he was in high school, I think, he would work on the lemon farms down in Mexico. And on these lemon farms, these lemon trees have massive spikes. And so in order to, reach up and grab these lemons, they have to wear like a full leather get-up. So, Mexican summer heat, crazy hot, wearing an insane amount on their bodies. And he said that the people that took salt pills prior to starting, they would be able to work a full day. And the people that didn't take salt pills, at lunch, they would be toast and they would have to leave. And so I just found that very interesting that they have salt pills and you can just, throw back a salt tablet. So, and then there's also this whole, all this hype about different types of salt. There's so much contamination in salt that isn't just pure sodium chloride. And they talk about, all of these different minerals that you're getting, but a lot of these trace minerals that you're getting in these, sea salts and, the pink salts that they sell. A lot of these, quote unquote trace minerals are just poisons is what they are. And so you're literally poisoning yourself by taking these. And so that's why I'm, when it says NaCl in here, I'm saying sodium chloride for a very specific reason. This is the thing that our body needs in regards to salt intake. Okay, moving on. They found that in most cases, additional salt helped within hours. More importantly, during all those years, they haven't seen one case where salt supplementation has caused negative effects. The worst effect was no effect. Support for this critical role of sodium chloride intake during pregnancy was already provided by Robinson in 1958, who found a reduced incidence of preeclampsia in pregnant women on a high salt diet. This study introduced substantial data for bias in other studies, of which all data suggest that salt restriction during pregnancy does not seem promising for the prevention of preeclampsia. Or, as the study of Mohout et al. Concludes, pregnant women with even subtle signs of volume deficiency might benefit from salt supplementation in pregnancy. And then we have several footnotes there. And then you also have another article that you can read called Additional Salt Help Reducing Blood Pressure in Pregnant Women with Low Aldosterone Level. And then we have the following, which is reprinted from What Every Pregnant Woman Should Know by Gail Brewer with Tom Brewer. Okay, and like I said, this is Tom Brewer's wife, Gail Brewer, and this is from 1977, and she has many books out there. And this reprint is from page 24 of that book, and it's called Low Salt Diets, Why They Don't Work. Every day of her life, the expectant mother, like every other man and woman, needs salt. Each of the trillions of cells that make up her body testify to this biological necessity. Like the cells of all species evolved from the sea, hers must be continually bathed in salt water to remain healthy. Her unborn baby shares this legacy. Afloat in a sack filled with hospitable brine, the baby obtains all the salt it needs from the mother's circulating supply. The only way the essential salt will be in the mother's bloodstream is if she eats it. Salt is a component of many foods. In addition to being readily available in its commonest form, ordinary table salt. The placenta permits the transfer of salt from the mother's bloodstream to the babies from the earliest weeks of pregnancy until the moment of birth. Every person has many finely tuned mechanisms which work in the body to preserve the appropriate concentration of salt in and around each cell and in the bloodstream. These mechanisms are interrelated, so that a change in salt metabolism, which affects one of them, causes adjustments in others. Human salt requirements are widely variable depending on an individual's level of physical activity, state of health or illness, and the external temperature and humidity. There is a great deal of concern today about overconsumption of salt in our country. Studies have shown that excess salt intake from infancy onward may result from the intake of prepared foods and snack foods, which contain a great deal of salt, but little else nutritionally, and have come to comprise a large part of the diets of many people. While the concern about oversalting may be legitimate in terms of overall public health, there is one group of people for whom oversalting is not a problem: pregnant women. In fact, pregnancy is one condition in which the body requires more salt in order to remain healthy. Numerous changes in the mother's body during pregnancy explain this increased need for salt. And this is the problem with the entire health paradigm, pharmaceutical paradigm out there, allopathy, is that they shoot for the lowest common denominator. Meaning, for example, the Hep B V word, right? They just give this thing willy-nilly, and we won't talk about the studies of whether it's efficacious or not, but they just give this to every baby, regardless of the risk of it, not taking into account, what is the mother, doing whatever that would require them to have protection from Hep B. At what point would this baby need protection from Hep B, et cetera, right? Lowest common denominator. And that's the same with this health thing, this salt thing, sorry. Maybe there's studies showing that salt is the problem, and it's not all the unnecessary things in those processed foods. But even if there is, every body is unique and individual, and we have to take back control, right? We have to stop outsourcing these things, like, for example, in my opinion, the education of our children, right? And on top of that, our own health. I had several people in my life that got the specific pokey thing in 2021, and when I talked to them and encouraged them, maybe it's not the best decision, they said, well, my doctor said I should do it, right? They're outsourcing. They're not using their own brain. And so if your own individual body is saying, I need salt, and you're having these cravings, well, quite possibly you should listen to your own body over what, some other governing body is telling you. But in reality, public health is not a thing, right? There is only the individual's health, your health, okay? And sure, we can look at some type of aggregate of the health of a population and come to some conclusions. But as far as you are concerned as a human individual, the only thing that is relevant is your health and what adds to it and what takes away from it. But this whole idea of herd immunity and things of this nature are just a sham to guilt people into doing things that make some people a little bit of money. Moving on. Of first importance is the growth and development of the placenta. This organ, unique to pregnancy, makes possible the exchange of all nutrients and waste products between mother and baby. As the baby grows and requires more nourishment, the placenta increases in size to provide it. If the placenta does not grow well, neither can the baby. As pregnancy progresses, the placenta needs a great deal more blood flowing through it in order to work efficiently. In normal pregnancy, the mother's blood volume must expand by more than 40% to meet this metabolic need. Salt is a chief element in maintaining this dramatically expanded blood volume. One of the properties of salt is that it causes the body to retain fluid, which under normal conditions is retained in the bloodstream, for use in placental perfusion. Salt restriction during pregnancy limits the normal expansion of the blood volume. A blood volume below the level needed to service the growing placenta produces disastrous consequences. Depending on the degree of salt restriction and subsequent blood volume limitation, the placenta may grow slowly or not at all, develop areas of dead tissue, infarcts, which cannot function, be unable to accomplish the transfer of all needed nutrients to the baby, or even begin to separate from the wall of the uterus, causing hemorrhage and cutting off the baby's oxygen supply. Obviously, when the ability of the placenta to function is impaired, the baby's growth, development, and even life are imperiled. Clinical evidence for this view of the importance of salt in pregnancy was provided in 1958 by Dr. Margaret Robinson, a London obstetrician. Working in a public clinic, she conducted a study of 2,019 pregnant women, chosen at random. Half were instructed to reduce their salt intake, half to increase it. Information about which foods contain high amounts of salt was given to the mothers in the low salt group. Dr. Robinson did nothing else by way of dietary counseling to influence what the mothers ate. She only asked them to report the amounts of salt they were eating. Unfortunately, not all the high salt foods in the restricted list are nutritionally deficient. For instance, many like milk, eggs, salty cheeses, salty fish, and salty meat products are important sources of essential high-quality proteins. Since this study was conducted with low-income mothers, for the most part, the effect of banning these foods from the diet because of their salt content was also to ban the lower-priced sources of excellent protein. Consequently, when the mothers followed the diet and were unable to afford higher-priced protein foods, such as lean meat, they were not only on a low-salt diet but on a low-protein one as well. So the outcome of the study is due not merely to salt restriction alone, but to a combination of salt and protein restriction. Since imposition of a low-salt regimen on a pregnant mother may well mean protein deprivation as well, the results of Robinson's work are very significant. The low-salt group had nearly 3 times more damaged placentas, 2.5 times more toxemia, and twice the number of infant deaths. The high-salt group fared better in other ways. They had fewer delivery complications and even a reduced incidence of leg cramps during pregnancy than mothers in the low-salt group. And you can see the results here. Again, this is adapted from Margaret Robinson, Salt in Pregnancy from The Lancet. And you can see on a high-salt diet, 37 out of 1,000 had toxemia, whereas on a low-salt diet, 97 out of 1,000 did. High-salt diet, 27 out of 1,000 had perinatal deaths, whereas you have almost twice as many, 50 out of 1,000, on the low-salt diet. High-salt diet, you had 9 out of 1,000 C-sections. And again, this was done in 1958, when C-section wasn't the go-to. So the doctor could get to his golf session, or whatever it may be. And again, that's not the only reason, but I've heard many stories of this being the case. And then on a low-salt diet, 14 out of 1,000. So again, not quite twice as much, but significantly more. Abruptio placenta on a high-salt diet, 17 out of 1,000, and then almost twice as much, 32 out of 1,000, on a low-salt diet. The inescapable conclusion is that dietary salt is an essential nutrient for the pregnant woman. It is required for optimum human reproductive efficiency. To restrict salt is to court disaster. Dr. Robinson, while proving this important point, did so at agonizing cost to the families whose babies died due to maternal salt and protein restriction. Mothers in the low salt group saw 24 more of their babies die, babies who might have been born healthy and strong if their mothers had happened to come into the clinic on another day. Despite these findings, many researchers today continue to demand that more studies like this be done on pregnant humans. Not satisfied with the wealth of supporting evidence from animal experiments conducted over the past 50 years as of 1977, they propose studying the effects of drug therapy, protein restriction, calorie restriction, vitamin restriction, mineral restriction, etc., all for the purpose of quote-unquote seeing what will happen. Their demands for quote-unquote control and quote-unquote experimental groups of pregnant mothers is clearly inhumane in light of the tragic consequences of just this one study, completely nearly 20 years ago as of 1977, persisting in subjecting more pregnant women and their unborn to hazardous deprivation experiments, or refusing to improve the diets of quote-unquote control mothers known to be suffering nutritional deficiencies in their daily diets, is criminal. Because of mounting criticism of such projects from a few lone voices in the scientific community and the public at large, many American researchers associated with prestigious universities and international health agencies have moved their projects out of this country. A baby who dies or is damaged in Guatemala provokes less outcry than one whose life is taken in Boston. Ruth Pike, a nutritionist at Pennsylvania State University, influenced by Robinson's work, decided to see if she could duplicate her findings in a highly controlled laboratory situation, using pregnant rats instead of human mothers as experimental subjects. Specifically, she wanted to describe changes in organs brought on by low-salt diets in pregnancy. Her experiments are significant because she did not restrict protein in the diets of the rats. Salt intake was the only variable in her two groups. She described two specific effects. First, rat mothers who were salt-restricted gave birth to offspring of low birth weight. Second, rat mothers on low-salt diets evidenced profound changes in the cells of the kidneys and adrenals. Pike found that when she reintroduced salt to the diet 3 days before delivery, the rats did not exhibit these changes. The damage to the organs was reversed when salt was added back to the diet. And this is just something people need to be reminded of how resilient our bodies are. It is really incredible. A lot of people lose hope, with their health issues, which is understandable, but you have to break out of this, what Dr. Pete talked about a lot, learned helplessness. And a lot of that can be nutritionally based, but getting out, taking a walk in nature, he talked about how important that could be to break out of this learned helplessness cycle. She also observed that rats whose diets contained little salt and who were presented with containers of salt water and distilled water at the same time chose the salt water first. Only after drinking enough of the salt water to provide the necessary amount of salt for their normal body functions did the rats move to the distilled water. Pike's observations should have been brought to the attention of American obstetricians long ago by ACOG. Such an action would have convinced physicians to stop handing out low-salt diets to their pregnant patients as a matter of course. Ranchers, farmers, and veterinarians have arrived at the same conclusions as Robinson and Pike through their own experience and experiments. This 1968 reminder in the Dairy Goat Journal emphasizes their practical approach to the question of dietary salt. And here we have an excerpt from that journal. Salt is in the forefront of all feed additives. Both sodium and chloride, salt's two components, are needed in the nutrition and physiology of all animals, including man. Without salt, life as we know it could not exist. With too little salt in the diet, depending merely on the small amounts of sodium and chloride inherently present in feeds, animals become unthrifty and in time go to pieces. Cows deliver weak calves or even lose their calves. Cows actually die from salt starvation. And being a farmer myself, this is very real. And go into any farm store anywhere near you, and it's one of the main things they sell, right? Salt licks, or there's all kinds of different salts that farmers are buying these days to get the appropriate minerals and things of that nature to their animals, but specifically salt. Researchers and people who work with animals would never presume to add a certain prescribed amount of salt to an animal's feed each day as a way of meeting that animal's needs. They follow the proven principle of allowing the animal's instinct for salt to operate. They set out salt blocks or buckets of crushed salt which the animals are free to lick as they feel the need. In this way, each animal's individual needs for salt are best met. And that's what we do. We just have salt everywhere for the animals to access. Humans have an identical salt regulating mechanism which, when allowed to function, guarantees an adequate supply of salt to the body. Taste buds, sensitive to salt, are present on the tongue and inside the cheeks. When your body needs salt, your food tastes flat and unappetizing. This is a signal to add more salt to your food. In this simple way, nature alerts all of us to our metabolic needs for salt. And we have salt sitting out in our house, and our kids every once in a while, go by and grab a little bit of salt. And I know probably most parents would be like, stop doing that or whatever. But I understand the importance, right? So we have our own animal lick inside the house. A little mineral buffet, apparently. Should a person happen to take in more salt on a given day than she needs, a second salt-regulating mechanism is activated. Her kidneys respond automatically to the elevated salt concentration in the blood by allowing excess salt to leave the body in the urine. This built-in adjustment makes sure her body never becomes overloaded with salt. Dr. Mary Jane Gray of the OB/GYN department of the University of Vermont Medical School has tested this salt-regulating mechanism in pregnant women. She tried to induce salt overload in them and failed. 28 pregnant women were divided into 2 groups and followed for a month. Even with urging from the doctor to increase salt intake by means of salt tablets, capsules, and syrups, the high salt mothers retained no excess sodium in their bodies. Nor did any of them develop toxemia, although classic teaching has been that too much salt in the diet leads to toxemia. There are few medical conditions for which the standard treatment includes salt restriction. High blood pressure or hypertension, heart failure, and kidney failure are examples. When women with such conditions become pregnant, or when pregnant women develop such conditions, special care must be exercised by the physician to see that the mother obtains enough salt to allow her blood volume to expand normally without triggering undesirable side effects. In the case of hypertension, recent research as of 1977 challenges the conventional wisdom. Dr. Lionel Scheitz of Michael Reese Hospital in Chicago reported in 1971 that even mothers with severe hypertension did better with liberal salt intake during pregnancy than when they were placed on rigid salt restriction and diuretics. Otherwise healthy pregnant women may encounter some circumstances in which, though their kidneys are functioning normal, they may lose more salt from the body than is healthful. Many women report bouts of vomiting for a time during pregnancy, commonly during the first 3 months. Diarrhea from flu or other illnesses also results in excess loss of salt and water from the body. Or if the mother lives in a hot climate, exercises strenuously, or works in a factory or laundry in high temperatures, she may sweat profusely. All these conditions boost the body's need for salt. If the mother does not take in more, salt depletion will activate temporary salt-conserving mechanisms in the kidneys and adrenal glands. If salt deprivation continues, these organs can become exhausted and show signs of degenerative disease. The best way for each pregnant woman to be assured of meeting her individualized needs for salt is to follow the wisdom of the body and salt her food to taste throughout the pregnancy. The body's simplest salt-regulating mechanism, the taste buds, are the most reliable guides to managing this aspect of human pregnancy nutrition. Why then do doctors continue to place mothers on low-salt diets? Firmly fixed in their minds is this magic number, quote-unquote. They have erroneously accepted as the upper limit of safety for pregnancy weight gain 24 pounds. Exceed 24 and risk toxemia, difficult labor, and maybe a lifetime of obesity. When their thinking is dominated by these concerns, physicians are likely to accept any practice that seems to control weight, even that of restricting one of the most vital substances in the body, salt. It seems unlikely that the laws of physiology and biochemistry which govern human salt metabolism are suspended in the case of the pregnant woman. Yet, doctors ignore these fundamental needs and persist in viewing salt restriction as an easy, safe way to rid the mother of worrisome pounds. The pregnant woman's problem is that her doctor has set artificial standards for weight gain and salt intake. In order to enforce these standards, he relies on her cooperation in a deliberate strategy of nutritional deprivation for the duration of her pregnancy. If she follows the diet, the protein-calorie deficiency it engenders will be further complicated by salt deficiency. After a time, her metabolism will be markedly altered due to a physiologic stress caused by malnutrition. She will become ill, her baby will suffer, and the diet will have failed. The low-salt, low-calorie diet doesn't work because it overlooks the body's physiologic salt-conserving mechanism and brings about the very conditions it was designed to prevent. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but the concern for weight gain causes them to go through this malnutrition process, which lowers the metabolism, making it more difficult to lose the weight, right? So if you want to have the weight problem, then follow the malnutrition guidelines. The caloric restriction, the salt restriction, right? You're severely damaging your metabolism and your ability to burn these calories, to put it in the most simple way, right? Number 1, high blood pressure, right? So these are the things that it's designed to prevent. High blood pressure. When salt is restricted below body requirements, the kidneys react by releasing a hormone, renin, into the bloodstream. Renin influences other hormones, which in turn cause the arterioles to constrict, specifically angiotensin, right? Angiotensin, right? This is a vasoconstricting protein. The effect is to raise the blood pressure since the same amount of blood is being pumped with the same force through a smaller opening, right? You have vasoconstriction, just like on a hose, you lessen the opening on the end of a hose and it's going to spray harder, right? This is higher blood pressure because it's being forced through a more narrow tunnel, right? The obstetrician worries about high blood pressure or hypertension since it often accompanies one of the most dangerous pregnancy diseases, toxemia. By putting the mother on a low-salt diet, he is inducing hypertension where there was none before. Okay, and so this is one of the many examples of intervention begetting further intervention. This is the same when you go into the hospital and they say you're not progressing fast enough, so they give you Pitocin. And now you're having really strong contractions and it's causing problems delivering the baby, and the cascade of interventions happens, and the end result is a C-section, right? And then further complications from that potentially. Okay, so the intervention of, telling the mom not to listen to her body and the amount of salt that her body craves. This is our first intervention, begetting toxemia, which begets eventually the C-section. Number 2, it's designed to prevent low protein intake. Not only does the conventional low-salt, low-protein diet directly limit the amount of protein available for the baby's growth and the mother's health by cutting back on her needed calories by 1/3, but the low-salt provision sharply limits her range of food choices and makes the permitted foods less palatable. Her appetite wanes, so she will probably eat less than she could under the diet's rules. She will then be even more severely malnourished than a first look at the diet indicates. As her intake of protein falls, her liver becomes less able to manufacture circulating serum proteins such as albumin, and albumin levels start to fall. As a result, water is lost from her bloodstream into the area surrounding the cells, the interstitial space. and it appears that other substances in the blood, such as iron, are present in very high levels. Fluid lost from the bloodstream shows up as generalized swelling of tissues called edema. Edema caused by this fall in albumin levels is abnormal, a sign of disease, pathological. It is associated with metabolic toxemia. Number 3, excess weight gain, and excess is in quotes there. The edema will increase as long as the woman's body is malnourished. Her kidneys excrete less water in the urine as they scramble to keep salt and water concentrations in the body within normal limits. The reabsorbed water cannot be held in the bloodstream since albumin levels are too low, so it leaks out into the tissues. The result is added swelling and added pounds. A logical, effective alternative to this type of stopgap dietary meddling would be a program for pregnancy nutrition which respects physiology. In order for an obstetrician to implement such a program in his practice, he would have to abandon traditional thinking and unscientific practices taught him by his professors in medical school. Instead, he would focus his efforts on preventative care, on getting each prospective mother to eat good foods, to appetite, and to salt her food to taste. Doing so, though, would soon lead him to a confrontation with another aspect of his routine practice, the diagnosis and treatment of edema or swelling. He would find to his acute distress that the vast majority of pregnant women who eat to appetite and salt to taste, whose diets provide the optimum amounts of protein, calories, and salt, do swell during pregnancy, normally. Okay, and then we have 3 links here for a couple of different articles that you can look into for further reading. And then we have a couple of graphs here. Nutritional deficiency in pregnancy, and it shows complications and then how many have those complications dependent on what group they're a part of, the control group or the nutrition group, receiving a good amount of nutrition, right? The appropriate amount. Preeclampsia, you have 59 out of 750, whereas in the nutrition group, 0 out of 750. Eclampsia, right? Preeclampsia has progressed into full-on eclampsia. You have 5 out of 750 in the control group and 0, once again, out of 750 in the nutrition group. Premature, 5-pound or less babies, you have 37 out of 750 in the control group and 0 in the nutrition group. And then infant mortality, you have 54.6 out of 1,000 in the control group, and then you have 4 out of 1,000 in the nutrition group, which is just shocking. 4 compared to 54.6, thousands of a percent higher. Okay, and again, that's adapted from Winslow Tompkins' Journal of International College of Surgeons, and you can look it up there from 1941. Okay, and I'm going to end this one with this other table called Preventative of Convulsive MTLP or Eclampsia, and you can see here Tompkins 1941, number of pregnancies 750, and you have 0 cases of eclampsia. Then you have another study by Hamlin in 52, 500 pregnancies, 0 cases of eclampsia. And then it just goes down. Bradley, 13,000 number of pregnancies, 0 cases of eclampsia. Davis, 1976, 500 pregnancies, 0 cases of eclampsia. And then Brewer in 1976, 7,000 pregnancies, 0 cases. That's a total of 26,250 cases or numbers of pregnancies, 0 overall cases of eclampsia. Okay, and then we have some text that goes along with this before we wrap up. At the first sign of a rising blood pressure, pathological edema, preeclampsia, IUGR, premature labor, or HELLP, a Brewer diet counselor should sit down with the mother and help her to evaluate her lifestyle and her diet to see if any adjustments can be made to optimize the fit between her pregnancy, her diet, and her lifestyle. For example, to compensate for her salt and calorie losses, she can cut back on her exercise program and her work schedule. She can stay out of the heat, outdoors, at work, or at home. She can postpone a move until after the birth and 6 weeks postpartum, and she can increase her salt, calorie, protein intake. One way that she can increase her diet intake is to add 200 calories and 20 grams of protein for each of the following situations. Vomiting past the 3rd month of pregnancy, pregnancies spaced less than a year apart, previous pregnancy with low birth rate, neurological handicap, or stillborn child as the outcome, a history of 2 or more miscarriages, a history of toxemia, failure to gain 10 pounds by the 20th week of pregnancy, serious emotional problems, working full-time at a demanding job, breastfeeding an older baby during pregnancy, and multiple pregnancy, twins or more. Multiple pregnancy is the only exception. Each extra baby requires a nutritional supplement of 30 grams of protein and 500 calories per day. Higgins comments that this requirement can be met most economically by adding 1 quart of whole milk a day to the expectant mother's diet, to be drunk, used in cream soups, custards, milkshakes, cream pies, and tarts, or as exchanges in yogurt, ice milk, and natural cheeses. Of course, there are many other ways to increase the protein and calories during pregnancy by eating an additional 4-ounce serving of meat, fish, shellfish, poultry, or meat substitute as detailed on the diet list. And that information is reprinted and adapted from the work of Agnes Higgins and Gail Brewer's The Complete Pregnancy Diet, Meeting Your Special Needs, from Eating for Two by Isaac Cronin and Gail Brewer, 1983. Then you have a couple of links. Okay, and I'll pick up in the next video right there. But hope that gets across the importance of salt at this important time. And then the importance of listening to your body, right? Our natural intuition. Our bodies know what we need, and we just need to start listening to them. Okay, I hope that helps. Please send this video to anyone who is pregnant, looking to get pregnant, or has been pregnant. This is some very important information that can really help people, can help save lives. And so I hope that you share this with your family and friends. Until next time, God bless.